Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Vietnam Innovators episode. We're super happy to welcome Winnie Wong. She's the country manager of Mastercard in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, all of Indochina. We're inviting Mastercard and Winnie on the show today because we're really interested in exploring more about the facets and the growth of fintech, digital payments, and the general macroeconomy. And what better than to hear from Mastercard, which is one of the largest kind of payments processing companies in the world, technology companies. I'm sure they're processing trillions of dollars a year. They have a lot of insights they could possibly share with us today. So welcome to the show, Winnie. We'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Winnie, and as Hảo says, I'm the country manager for Mastercard based in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh. And I've been here for the last couple of years now, leading the business here and across Cambodia and Laos. And I'm very happy to share some insights with you guys, hopefully, and learn from each other today.
Cool. Yeah, so obviously Mastercard's playing in a huge space. We've got a bunch of other players in the space, and Mastercard is one of those. In Vietnam, though, it's been a market that historically has been a very cash-based society.
Yep.
What kind of signals were Mastercard and your team seeing that kind of encouraged you guys to start in Vietnam and for you to move here as well? You're Singaporean, I'm guessing?
Yes. So for us, for Mastercard, we've been on a path to drive, a world beyond cash. So digitalization of payments is where we've been focusing on for the last 50 years, and more so in the last 5-10 years, where we've really seen an acceleration towards literally beyond cash. So Vietnam, we've been here for quite many years now. Our office has been very active in working with the regulator, State Bank of Vietnam, with the banks, and now more so with fintechs also, fintechs, e-wallets in the market to really drive digital payments here. And, Vietnam for us has been one of the fastest growing in the region, in Southeast Asia and also in Asia Pacific. So we've been very, very bullish about the signs and trends that we are seeing. Starting from the regulators' push to drive cashless and the cashless agenda and vision for the Vietnam government, to the public-private partnership that we're seeing now between us, the banks, and literally the fintech players that are all coming together to drive this in markets. So a lot of exciting initiatives that are happening. Yes, it's still very a cash-based economy, and we think still a lot of work still needs to be done. But I think the willingness to push this forward, I think it's very, very encouraging for us. We also hope to bring a lot of expertise from the region and global that we have learned from other countries to accelerate the growth in here. So that's some of the things that we're working very directly here.
Excellent. Yeah. And when you say growth, is that the volume of spending that's happening with Mastercard products in Vietnam?
Yeah. So growth. So it's not just only the spending on Mastercard, but even we see growth overall on non-cash. So it's not just on Mastercard, but even on any types of digital payments. But of course, specifically for us, we've seen great growth ourselves here. And we know that, at least for us, this is only just the tip of the iceberg. We think that more will be coming too.
Cool.
Yeah.
So when we think of MasterCard too, we usually think of the credit card, the debit card, especially coming from the West or a place like Singapore. In Vietnam, credit cards are still fairly difficult to get, from what I understand. Like, credit limits are fairly low.
Right.
Debit cards are a bit more accessible. What are you guys doing in terms of adoption with these banks to get more MasterCards in the hands of Vietnamese consumers?
So that's a great question, and we get this a lot. For us, actually, for Mastercard, we're not literally a credit card company, and this is what I like to tell people, because we neither credit nor just only card, because it's the banks that give the credit, so we don't determine the credit, and the banks will have the underwriting procedures, etc., to give the credit. And honestly, for us, we're not limited by card anymore. As a company, we've moved on to literally any digital payment. We've been very active in promoting account-to-accounts, multi-rail strategy. So, for example, previously, probably, if you have a card, you can only use it on the terminal, or if a bank account, you can only, transfer to a bank account. But we've been on the cutting edge of technology where we're bringing solutions to banks and fintechs and partners that a card can pay into a bank account can pay into card. We've been very active in our acquisition of account-to-account payment capabilities and leveraging and managing that. So we actually identify ourselves as more as a payment technology company.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we're really here to bring the capability to banks and fintechs. We see cards, or be it, debit cards, credit cards, using phones, using watches, anything that may come, right? So we're on the forefront of innovation. We literally see that as the window to data and transaction rather than a credit card per se.
Okay.
But you're right. I mean, and we're continuously working with banks to make sure that the payment tool becomes easier and more accessible to the people on the streets, to literally any sectors or segments of society.
Cool. And so, going along that narrative of technology, digital payments, what are some examples of successful partnerships that you guys have done, perhaps in the fintech or bank side, that have accelerated that narrative for you guys here in Vietnam?
Yeah. So for us, so we know a lot of banks are looking to drive towards a digital banking, neo-banking, and we've seen that across the world, from Europe to Singapore. A lot of non-banks are getting their digital bank licenses. Here in Vietnam, we see that banks themselves are looking to go digital. Mobile first, digital first has been initiatives that we've been talking to banks about, right? It's not about, you walking to a branch, right? It's about how does the bank serve you better through your phone, through the medium that you as a consumer is most comfortable with. And that, by and large, given the segment and the growth of the millennials and the penetration of phones and internet, that by and large has become mobile first, or we call it digital first. So we bring some of our solutions to banks, because to go from a traditional bank, so to speak, into a digital bank, there are a lot of enhancements that the banks will need to do, from just how they identify you, how do they make sure that you are you, and you're not
KYC
someone with the KYC, right? Through the phone, and when you call into the contact center of the bank, or when you walk into the branch, how do they then bring this across the different channels? As bank opens up the different channels, how do they make sure that you're not remembering like 5 different passwords and remember all of these? So we have solutions to help banks to have a standardized, simplified way to identify the person through biometrics, using AI to see even the way you hold the phone, for example. So if you lose the phone and someone else takes the phone and they type differently from the way you type, there's a flag to the banks and says, you may want to check this closely. This may or may not be that person. So all this, while the consumers don't see it, but it brings more safety, security to the transactions and the way the banks will interoperate with you or transact with you, and also better customer experience, because you're not asking like 5 different things on the phone. In the old days, it was always a balance between security and experience. Like if you want great experience, it's not great security, because then you're minusing some steps, right? But if you want great steps, great security, and then it's like customers to do a lot of things. So we always on the forefront of trying to marry the two objectives, and putting customer first, experience first, so that the banks can serve the customers better. So, but yet not risking the transactions, and still safety, security of the transactions still comes foremost for us.
I was about to say, I think KYC in Vietnam is fairly tricky, because in the US, let's say, where I'm from, there's decades of credit scores and KYC that banks could do very, very quickly.
Yes.
I mean, I've heard of a lot of technology companies in Vietnam. There's one that comes to mind actually called Trusting Social. They use like bank or telco information, I think, to produce credit scores.
Credit scorings, yes.
Not sure how detailed or effective those have been. I'm not too sure about the workings of that company, but I do know they've grown tremendously over the last few years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's an interesting space and a question that a lot of people have, because things like corporate governance, KYC, fraud, I'm sure is rampant in Vietnam, unfortunately, although it's improving dramatically over the last few years with the helps of fintechs and digital payments solutions like Mastercard. That's great. Well, talking at a more macro level, and you're seeing a lot of these transaction volumes. I'm not sure if you're open to sharing those today, but I mean, what progress from like a numbers point of view or a macro level, not too much about like regulation or initiatives that are being done that make you believe that Vietnam is making significant progress to becoming a cashless society? What are those trends that you're seeing from a consumer level?
Yeah, so we've seen that the digital growth, the e-commerce growth, digital payments growth has been on a very, very high double digits in Vietnam. Very
Annually.
high, fastest growing annually.
Okay.
Yes, fastest growing in this region. So that's been very, very bullish for us. Obviously, COVID aside, I think that globally there's been impact to COVID this year. This is an unprecedented year for us. I think for both Mastercard and the market, and the Vietnam market, has been so growing by leaps and bounds, obviously, but on a small base, right? I mean, you can't compare the growth to, this is still exponential compared to, more mature markets like the US or Singapore. But there's huge room to grow. Having said that, even though, this year has been quite a challenging year, where we don't see tourists, we don't see people traveling.
I was about to say, you don't have to share, but maybe broadly speaking, what is the breakdown between international Mastercard spend and domestic Mastercard spend in Vietnam? Are you seeing trends? Maybe you could share there a little bit.
Yeah,
you kind of hinted at it, I guess. The international one just collapsed, probably.
Yeah. Collapse is probably a good word. Yeah, I mean, we still, it's barely on the minimum, right? Just because there's no one traveling in and out. So it's gone down to, and it's not just Vietnam, it's globally, and until we get, I think, improvements or vaccines or what have you on the macro level, I think that's still going to be very challenging for us. For us though, having said that, on the domestic level, we've seen the growth back to pre-COVID levels. Now, the second phase aside, after the first, wave that we've seen, Vietnam has very quickly kind of recovered, right, from that wave, thanks to the effective measures of the government. I think people were very confident. And so, towards like Q2, before the second wave, we've already seen, trends were getting back to pre-COVID levels for domestic, especially for online spend. And then the second phase happened. And now we're also seeing, signs that we're going to get back to the pre-COVID levels. So I think, domestically we're very bullish. But of course, without the international spends, companies like us where, we do bring the value proposition, of connecting people, not just domestically and globally. So part of our value proposition, it's not fulfilled or not used or not leveraged enough in this environment, but we're happy that we're seeing domestic growth again, and hopefully sometime next year, and hopefully earlier part of next year, I'm hoping that things will get hopefully back to normal.
Yeah, excellent.
For us. Yeah,
great. That's great to hear. Yeah, I remember when I used to own a restaurant in Saigon, so it was always funny to see, or interesting, not funny, to see the breakdowns of spend across credit card or just cards in general to cash payments, even bank transfer occasionally. And I was part of that restaurant for a couple years, and just being on the ground in the media company, obviously we can see it, but the shift to spending on cards has been astronomical. I would say in double digits as well. So it's great to hear that you guys are seeing that great growth. We're talking a lot about the positives here. I think, what are some of the challenges that Mastercard's facing in the market? I think, there's regulation. I don't think that's as a negative necessarily. I think it's something to work with the regulators to make sure that's secure and safe and primed for long-term stability. But maybe on the consumer side, you can share what are some of those challenges that you're seeing? Is it like points of adoption? Is it people just not seeing the value of accepting digital payments and card payments? Maybe you can share about that.
Yeah. No, so that's a great question. And actually, you bringing up the restaurant is probably a good segue to dimensionalize that. So honestly, I think for us, the biggest challenge is still consumer behavior. As you rightly pointed out, this is still a very cash-based economy, right? And depends on the sector, it's as high as 80%, still very cash-based.
Okay.
So we're constantly, us and other industry players are constantly trying to drive cashless and the benefits of cashless. But it's both ways, right? It's both the merchant acceptance and also the consumer. I think consumer behavior, once you show the benefits and the ease of use, and that's why we've seen, great adoption or greater adoption. But I think one area that we also need to work towards, and we as in like the industry still need to work towards, is really the merchant adoption. There's been, hesitation in certain merchants to accept cashless digital payments. We've also seen, some of them, putting on a surcharge to accept cash, which is like...
That's technically illegal, isn't it? Or... in the US,
it's not. Yeah, it's actually not. It's not something that can and should be done.
And what are the typical fees in Vietnam? Is it like the global standard, like 2.5% plus a fixed fee?
Yeah, so I will say the fees here is actually quite comparable to the global standards, so it's not way too astronomical. But I think, and we've seen this even in some of the countries when they start adopting cashless, that they think that, there's this fee that I'm paying, but actually that they forget that there's a cost to cash.
Handling the cash,
losing the cash.
Yeah, a lot of theft,
fraud,
probably.
Thefts, right? Restaurants, your staff may say that, we lost that amount, but was it really lost, or was it really that, your staff was, so a lot of things. I'm not saying every restaurant. I can
tell you now it's happened multiple times, and the excuse is always exactly as you said. And I'm a huge proponent of cashless because that 2-3%, whatever you're paying, that's an administrative cost saving, you could say.
Yeah.
Or instead of paying that in overhead, you can just pay to a processor, which alleviates that
whole
process for you.
Exactly. The whole processing cost or the unforeseen cost, right? That gets into that. And the other thing for us, why we're also pushing digital payments and how we're trying to educate the merchant is that cash is not recorded. I mean, okay, so you have your recording. I'm not saying that you don't do your bookkeeping, right? But, it's still very paper-based manual recording, right? But for digital payments, everything is recorded online, right? The bank has your records. It's all just printed out. And so, one of the biggest gripe of an SME is to get funding, credit. It's a vicious cycle, and I don't think a lot of SMEs realize that, right? Without proper bookkeeping and recording and so-called history, accepted or acknowledged forms of documentation, right? Rather than something that you write by hand versus something that the bank gives you as a statement, right? So all these are like accepted, forms of documentation that the bank wants to see, and records of proof, records that you have a growing, thriving business rather than, hey, come to my restaurant and see the people, right? Yeah. So all these are proof that the banks will like, for them to do the credit evaluation.
Yeah. Do the Vietnamese businesses care though? I mean, there's caring and then knowing. I think ignorance is bliss, I think, for these consumers because it's been decades of cash-based payments and they're cool with that. But I think the benefits, we talk about the administrative cost saving, the access to credit, all these different things. What education is Mastercard doing to communicate that? Because I think, for us to talk about, okay, great.
Yeah.
But what are you doing at the boots and ground level to do that? Like, do you have sales teams that go communicate that to merchants? I mean, maybe not. Like, what does that look like in practice?
Yeah. So let me touch on the earlier question first on whether do they care, do the merchants care? I think that's a great question because they care when they want credit, right? And then
it's very reactive.
It's very reactive because we speak to quite a few SMEs on the ground, and credit is always the number one, like, access to financing, or even just like what you spoke about earlier, right? It's very difficult to even get like a credit card, right? You have to put some collateral and then I give you some credit, right? But it's a vicious circle again, right? It's a vicious cycle. So they can when they want credit. And then they go, oh, I need this, but I don't have this. Now what I do? Collateral. I mean, that's the best thing the bank can ask for you.
That's why loans are still so popular in Vietnam. Like, I remember there's this company called F88. It's like, I've never been to it, but it's essentially, I don't want to say loan shark, but it's a loan business, and the interest rates are massive. But I think Vietnamese people, because the behavior is very reactive, when they need it, they're willing to pay higher fees for it. They get kind of, they pay a lot of money for it. But if you actually just have, even decent credit or even a history, the rates are much lower, I'm sure, and access and
exactly. So for us, it's exactly that, right? So once you have, long-standing credit, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, I don't know, right? Whatever the bank requires, right? But really, once you have that proof of a thriving business, there's no reason why a bank would not want to lend to you.
Do young people, businesses aside, do young people care? I mean, like, think about, let's say, you're a young Vietnamese person, you just finished uni, you're making 10, 15 million a month. What is the incentive for them to build that history?
So you're right. So I think for young people, again, they don't realize it. They'd be like, oh, I have a debit card, it works just as well, which is great, right? But then over time, you may want to get, buy a bigger purchase, you want to buy, a house or something. So again, all of this needs history. You pointed out earlier about, bureau and some of these things that are not necessarily here. So with the lack of that, all the more it's very, very important to have some sort of a history with any bank or any files or anything that's recognized and not just, my mom said that I'm good, or my friend said that, I'm a good paymaster because I always pay back my, whatever I borrow from them. So all these are important. I think, back to your question earlier about education. So we do have materials, forums like this, going down to the streets or working with banks, working with fintechs, anytime that we can get, or working with regulators and all, anytime that we have an avenue to speak more about it, to drive the importance of it. So I've been on, some different panels, speaking to SMEs, especially, even, entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. It's almost like an aha moment for some of them, because just like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I'm like, yeah, it's,
I see that it's huge. I mean, on Vietcetera, on our media channel, we have about 1 million readers per month-ish kind of thing. And actually, since April especially, and I've always been an advocate for it as a CEO, but since April, I guess when people were losing their jobs, getting pay cuts, they're all looking for ways to invest and to save money.
Yes.
Anything related to personal finance and careers skyrocketed on the website, on both organic channels, search channels, and all that. And I think there's a trend emerging where young Vietnamese people, again, in a reactive way, and you can't blame them. I think young people are always reactive, that they're exploring new ways to save, spend, invest money. And a lot of it is fundamentally just through education and understanding how things like credit and payments and banks work. And unfortunately, more of an opportunity, I would say, but a lot of traditional companies in Vietnam in that industry have not yet done that. And I think, again, speaking from an outside perspective, commenting on it, that's a huge opportunity for a company, a brand, a group to really own, knowing that Gen Z and millennials are the largest category and they're open to listening. I think they're reactive, but at least open to listening. So it's great to hear that you guys are doing some work there and trying to communicate that at a larger scale.
Still a lot of work to be done.
Of course.
By all of us. This is just literally, like I said, the tip of the iceberg. I recognize there's a lot of work still to be done.
And I was going to ask this question earlier, but we got a little bit off track. I mean, you talk about Mastercard's growth, and could you share a little bit about like the team and what the size of your ambitions are? Like how many people you have here? What do your offices look for, like Indochina? Your footprint in the country from an internal point of view. What does that look like?
So the way Mastercard structures is that the team on the ground in the countries, we call them we call ourselves satellite offices. It's pretty lean, in fact, very lean. We leverage a lot of support, subject matter experts from the region, and our regional office is in Singapore. So I'm posted from the region. So for example, for us here, I have a very small team here, and most of my team are focused as frontliners. So we're like account managers or business development, where we are literally like
sales
facing clients. Yes, sales and marketing.
When you say clients, who are those clients?
So our clients are banks. So banks are our traditional clients. So we're actually a B2B2C company. I think that's also the other myth.
People are always confused
perception.
about that, but it's like
Correct.
You guys are the business to the next business, which is the bank, and the bank is the retail client.
Correct.
For the consumer.
Correct. For the consumer, correct. So like, for example, and that's why I started by saying, we are neither a credit nor a card company, because we actually don't issue the card. It's like any bank in Vietnam.
You guys are the processor,
we are the processor, we're the network, right? And so if you hold a Mastercard and you go into any merchant and you see that Mastercard sign, be it, in Vietnam or outside of Vietnam, we are the connectivity between the banks.
That's an interesting branding thing though, because as a consumer who knows, let's say, nothing about this, right? I mean, personally, I know much more, but for most of the average people, they would think like, oh, Mastercard is the one,
Correct.
But no, it's actually like, Vietcom Bank, or it's like Vietcom Bank or Techcom Bank or whatever.
That they will be the one that's issuing. Correct.
So, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have done studies about this, but do consumers know? Like,
I would say by and large, not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that an opportunity or a challenge for you guys, would you say?
Actually, we're not, honestly, so we will continue to build our branding, just more from the acceptance side of it. But for us, it's actually twofold. Number one, banks are our clients, and banks and even fintechs and other partners, right? Even now we've gone into non-bank, like telcos and all are potentially our clients. So by and large, given that we're a payment technology company, it's not too critical for us to get our branding out there. In fact, there are a lot of solutions that we are providing to banks and fintechs and other industries that it literally uses our technology, and our brand is hidden, right? So that's one part of our business that we're fine with it. But on a more consumer end, we do still want to continue to build our brand more, because from a customer remembrance and acceptance, like, when I see it, I know I can pull up my card, or I can use my phone and my watch or phone. Stuff.
I'm the same way. I think out of my portfolio, I have two cards. I have a Visa and I have a Mastercard, and I do have an American Express, but it's not really taken here, so I don't use it. But sometimes I see promotions, for example, like Citibank partnered with Mastercard. You guys spend here, you get a discount. I mean, that's a bit more incentive driven. But even from a branding point of view, if you see, oh, Mastercard's accepted here in the window, it's just like an instinctual thing that you might more likely pay for Mastercard. Or when you have your you get your check, they come with a leather booklet or whatever it's called, and it puts the big logo there. You're like, okay, I'm gonna,
yes.
You don't make that decision, but it's instinctual, right?
Yes, so, correct. It's you're right. And it should come into a point that it becomes a habit. Right, so we're trying to build that habit. As you said, right? The digital payments is still growing here, so it's not an instinct that people still think of cash, right? You open your wallet and see how much do you have, even though it's like all the brands are there that you can actually accept. So we're trying to build that habit. That one day, so you're from the States and even Singapore, you don't even think about it. Like you just pull out the card. I literally can live with like $2 or $2 in my wallet. But everywhere is either tap or phone or tap or anything. Watch. And we want to get to that level in Vietnam.
I'd be very curious, and maybe you guys have that information. I'm just kind of speaking out loud here. Thinking out loud, what the perception of Vietnamese consumers are related to brands like Visa, Mastercard, American Express. American Express is probably zero here, but just like, what is that feeling when, I'm very curious. If you had to share just in a very short bit.
Yeah.
What does Mastercard mean for Vietnamese consumers?
So, I think for Visa for ourselves, when we done a brand tracking, I think maybe largely for cards, we're good for travel. I think they've associated, so they've associated with us with travel, either from the messaging that we've sent out or your actual experience when you go overseas, where you don't want to be settled with all the different currencies, right?
Like access, convenience.
So it becomes very convenient. It becomes very safe. Like losing a card is different from dropping cash on the ground, right? Where you can call the bank and say, "Hey, please block my card." So, so we're known for so far good for travel. I think also good for online purchases. That's also been growing for us. So again, but these are still very nascent categories, right? We hope that at least for Mastercard, one day we're known for everyday, transactions and purchases.
Or you are already, but how to just like
we're already there for certain segments. But we want to make sure that it's more.
And that's where the opportunity in Vietnam is, especially because if you can capture the customer at a younger age. With things that resonate with them, correct. Young people, they're spending on travel, eating out, maybe smaller transactions, and then you can capture them, then be like a partner with them, right? And they can grow over time, and when they're like 30 years old, they're buying a refrigerator, a TV. That's when you guys make a lot more money, right? So I think
it'll get there.
It'll get there,
very sooner rather than later.
And that's the exciting opportunity in Vietnam, I would say, because adoption compared to the global standard is just so low, which is an exciting opportunity. And I think, to kind of recap today's conversation, we're nearing the end of today's session with Winnie today. There's a lot of banks, fintech companies, digital payment solutions, card processors, all you guys in this entire ecosystem really looking at the Gen Z millennial, and you guys are like, wow, it's exploding in Vietnam. And it's really one of the last frontiers when it comes to that massive growth, and luckily not just from a population size, but also spending power. Vietnamese consumers at a young level, they're getting more job opportunities, super high economic growth, their salaries are rising. If you compare it to other countries of the world, with COVID especially dampening some of their kind of, at least the next 2 years, whereas Vietnam is still GDP, at least growing. So, super excited for you guys. Welcome to Vietnam, Winnie. You've been here a few years already, but welcome to, we're excited to have leaders like you here in the market and driving this innovation, hence the name Vietnam Innovators. Don't forget that, guys. And looking at the greater ecosystem and fintech, we're super keen to have you here today, Winnie, and I'm sure our followers will have more questions and all that later that maybe we'll pass on to you after.
Sure.
Do you have any final words that you might want to share with our readers today about Mastercard Vietnam? What should they remember about what you guys are doing here?
So thank you, Hảo, and it's been a very interesting session. Even for me, I think this chat has been really good, and trying to send that message out there. I think for us, number one, we'll continue to invest and thrive in this country, bringing in our payment solutions, innovative payment solutions. That banks and fintechs may or may not be exposed to yet. So we hope to bring more and more as we grow and develop more and more, innovative solutions. Some of the things we're not even, may not even be in the market yet, but definitely we're at the forefront of that cutting technology. And that, with the growth of Vietnam, like you rightly pointed out, right, not just only from the population size, but even the growing millennials, the growing handphone penetration, largest middle-sized class, fastest growing middle class that we're seeing in this region. So all points towards a very, very exciting future for us. And so, happy to stay connected. Any questions, let us know. We're happy to share, whatever we can, and whatever we, need to drive and thrive in this country.
Cool.
So thank
you. Excellent. Thanks everyone for joining, and especially to Mastercard and Winnie here. Tune in for next week's episode on Vietnam Innovators. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd also like to give a big thanks to our sponsors, Geo Health, our launch partner in this new series. Geo is one of the must-watch innovators in the technology and healthcare space in Southeast Asia. They are best known for their doctor-at-home services, introducing the likes of a new smart clinic at M Plaza in Saigon. For those interested in watching the technology and healthcare space, they are definitely one of the ones to watch.